Hello, stream. This is Ted here. I am still working on Rogue Deck Builder, of course, my next game, prototyping it. Um, where are we leaving off? So, first of all, let's talk about what the game is. Rogue Deck Builder is a roguelike deck builder where you play as a middle-aged man who has become disenfranchised with his local city government. The city council passed a resolution limiting the size of decks and/or porch installments on the back of houses. And you do this for a living, so you obviously are incensed at it. You decide to go rogue and build the deck however the hell you want to. So the way that you build that deck is with these cards. When I place a card down to build something on my deck, like a post hole or a joist, I can add pieces onto my deck using these cards. Now, the neighbors don't really like it that you're building the deck this way. A number of people don't like that you're building the deck this way. HOA doesn't like that you're building the deck this way. Building inspectors don't like that you're building the deck this way. The city council, random Karens, you name it, people don't like that you're doing this. And so you must also defend your deck. So the game has this is the deck building phase, right? And then I'm about to go into the deck defense phase. So it really is a roguelike deck builder in that there are enemies that will now come after me and I'm going to have to use this turret and I'm going to have to defend my deck, right? So if I survive, or the deck survives, and I get all the enemies, then I can go on to the next deck building phase where I draw another set of cards here. And I can use them to continue to expand on this deck. That's kind of the core. So the game's at a state where it's got the core loop in place. But from a gameplay perspective, I've not yet hit on the core hook. So the core hook, I think, is that there needs to be, as is common in it needs to be an actual roguelike deck builder. It can't just be a roguelike deck builder by name or on the surface. It very at a deep level in terms of the actual mechanics in the game, in terms of the rules, needs to be a roguelike deck builder. So what does that mean? Well, what it means is the cards in this deck that you as you play this game need to choose new cards to go into this deck right here. And the cards that you choose to put in that deck need to synergize with the way that you build this deck right here. So that's what makes it feel like a deck builder, like something of that genre, right? When you play like Magic the Gathering, what makes that a deck builder is that before you play the game, you get to go and you've got your big war chest of Magic cards and you get to pick all the cards that go in your deck. And then when you sit down and play with your friends, you've got some kind of strategy to counter their strategy or whatever. This is a little bit different because you're going to collect new cards as you progress through the game. And you're going to put them into this deck. But the thing is that those cards aren't going to mean much of anything. There's not going to be much of a deck building element to the game, in my opinion, if the cards don't also synergize with the properties of this deck. So what does that mean? Well, right now you see I've got this turret here, and it can fire a projectile, and that's cool. It's just a kind of a basic turret, but there's no, how shall I say, there's no like relationship between this turret and the structure of the deck that it's sitting on yet. There's nothing that's like tying those two together. So what I want to do is intentionally start to create some of those things that would tie these things that you can place down that would tie it to the structure of this deck. So what are some options here, right? This is kind of where I think just having a good ability to observe the properties of your game can really help as a designer, because the way I'm looking at it, there's already some things that I'm noticing that are natural to this space. So one thing I'm noticing is it's possible for there to be so different size deck panels. So this turret here is sitting on like what I would call a 1x1, right? So I can only fit one turret on that space. It's the size of that paneling of that deck comes from this post hole, this post hole, this post hole, this post hole, right? So all four of those things kind of like up next to each other, and then they're all joisted together. I get a 1x1, right? So this is also a 1x1, that's a 1x1. Well, what's this, right? I actually will finish, I'll finish joisting it just so you can see. This is going to be a 4x4, right? So I'll put another turret down, and then I'll end my turn and I'll defend again. So now we've got neighbors, they're going to come by, and the enemies are not all that sophisticated right now. Part of it is because I want to get to the core hook of the game before starting to go into depth about different enemy types, because I think that's going to inform a lot of the enemy types that are in the game. Okay, so great. I've got two more joists, so I can joist up this section, I can joist up this section, right? Maybe another post hole, I place that down. I'm going to wait to put another turret down. Well, actually, no, I will. I'll put this turret. Now I don't have much space to move around, but that's okay. So now more enemies are going to come. And what I've got basically right now is it's kind of like a generic tower defense game, and that's okay, but I don't think the game's going to be all that marketable if it's just another tower defense game. We've played that. We need something new, something with a hook, something people haven't played yet. So that's why I don't think this, from a gameplay perspective, is really quite there yet. So now I can connect this up with a joist, and now I get a 4x4 section, right? So cool. I can use boards. Boards are multi-purpose. I can use a board to completely joist or to completely panel over that section, and I can also use a board to heal a post hole. So they're dual purpose. But now what you'll notice is I've got this section here that's actually a 4x4. So it's like a large panel section, right? What I think is cool is now you notice that there's parts of the deck, not this deck, the patio deck, that have different properties with each other, right? So this is a larger panel, right? It's just by size, it's a larger panel. So what if there were a special kind of a turret that gains power or gains some kind of buff? Doesn't matter what, it's just some kind of buff, right? So there's a number of different dimensions along which one could buff a stat, right? You could have more powerful shots. So when they're fired, takes away more enemy hit points. Stronger knockback, right? So maybe like when the enemy is hit, he gets knocked back further. Maybe it's got a faster fire rate, right? So it just shoots a lot of projectiles really, really quickly. So that's an option. I think I'm running out of... You get the point. So more generally speaking, it being on a bigger panel buffs stat, okay? So that starts to create this relationship, because then what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to, maybe if I already have some of these big panels on my deck, I would start to prioritize creating larger and larger and larger panel sections, knowing that I'm going to get that bonus, right, out of it being placed on that larger panel. So now this deck building here starts to have a relationship with this deck building here, which in my opinion is the core of the game, Like that's the main hook. So I want to get to where that's happening from a playability perspective. So doesn't matter the thing is, it doesn't matter what stat we buff, right? It could be really any stat. We just need to pick a stat to buff. And then all of a sudden, some of those effects will become apparent, right? The point is that the game is going to have a lot of these things. It's going to have different turrets, different post holes, different ways that how you design the deck is going to affect what you put on the deck. Another option for some of the more astute observers might be, okay, well, what about so we've got this. Here's a difference. Like this this panel is larger than this panel, right? Well, here's another one. This joisted section is the largest joisted section in the game right now. So maybe there's a special turret that its power depends on the largest joisted section. So what kind of deck building strategy does that incentivize? Well, what I'm going to try and do is make a really, 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 really long joisted section so I can get the most out of that turret, right? That's just one option. So you can start to kind of think about that. Another possibility: what if these rim joists here? So I've got a rim joist here. They're made out of wood right now, right? Cool. But what if they were made out of metal, right? So and there was like a special electric, like electrically charged, or like a Tesla turret. Okay, and so then when the Tesla turret discharges, it travels along the metal, anything that's like metal, right? And so you would have a way to kind of electrify sections of your deck, right? So you could make this really elaborate, long electrified defense setup with these different kinds of towers that send electricity along the rim joists. And then, of course, because it's kind of fun and it's about this sort of explosive possibility space, you could also have different. You could have different. Where am I going with this? You could have like different buffs that you give to towers that you would only give a turret a buff if it's sitting next to a metal joist, right? Or if it's sitting on a panel that's got a metal joist on it, or something like that. So that again, the properties of how you the way that you build this deck affects the way that you build this deck, and vice versa. So that's what I'm aiming at right now, design-wise. So what I need to do in order to do that is put in the very first turret, which has those properties. So what is that? I think just starting with a simple turret that buffs when it's sitting on a larger panel is the first way to kind of aim at that. Now this, I wrote down actually, because I was thinking about it this morning, that this causes a design problem. And so I want to be a little bit more clear about what kind of design problem we're talking about. Now that there's a different kind of a turret, right? We've got two turrets in the game, or we're going to have two turrets in the game. It could start to get really confusing to the player because, okay, I've got this kind of generic gray turret, right? And that thing is just a turret. There's nothing special about that turret, except, it shoots, right? But now I'm starting to add in these other kinds of turrets that have these different properties. And on top of that, I'm going to be mixing and matching the different properties together, and almost this kind of like combinatoric sort of way. Ugh. Like that starts to get really confusing to the player because they're not going to be able to visually just look at the turret and be like, oh, I know that that's a that like I know that's a kind of turret that um, that gets its power from being on a larger deck panel, right? They're not going to be able to easily know that, especially if it's colored. If they're both like gray like that, then then in order to communicate that, you would have to do the kind of thing that I really dislike as a designer, which is I gotta like go and click on different stuff, right? So I gotta go and click on this one to see what it is. So at a very base level, there needs to be some kind of design language around these core properties or core dependencies between the different elements in the game. So one way I like to, so I'll just say what I wrote, which is it's hard to make the effects of certain cards visually apparent on first glance. How do you make an icon for a turret that gets a buff when sitting on large deck panels? There needs to be a way to make these effects iconic so you can see something about the turret and immediately know it has the dependency. It needs a design language. So at the very outset, I'm going to say I don't really know what this design language is, right? I'm working through figuring out what that's going to be. I have the first thing that comes to mind, which is really not much, but it's something, is, let me open this, just color them something different. So I tried out some different things. I thought, okay, well, maybe if I put like some little icons next to it. Part of my problem is I'm working in really low resolution pixel art, which is a little bit intentional just to kind of simplify things. And it also like, it makes it more difficult. It's a more difficult constraint because it kind of forces me to, it forces me to have to, when every pixel matters, it actually forces me to communicate things with more bigger blocks, almost in bigger blotches. It's like if I can't communicate it with a medium so simple as this, then it's going to be, I think, even harder to do it. Or it's like it shows me that there's going to be problems with communication later on down the road. So if I can easily solve the problems in pixel art, then maybe later on when I'm prototyping in high resolution or like really doing the final art style, I will, it won't be as big of a problem. Like I'll know that it's actually a pretty easy thing to communicate. So with this, I tried a bunch of different stuff. I tried like, maybe there's some things I kind of draw around the icon, but it's the same color. And I didn't want to redesign the actual turret because I still wanted it to look like a turret. So right now where I kind of landed was the best way to differentiate them, at least for the moment, that I can think of, is to just do a different, like a palette swap on the sprite. So now the blue ones have this property, right? And I'm also going to have to do some explaining on the card with just the description text, right? Which, I mean, if you play Magic the Gathering or you play any of these other more traditional deck builder game genres, then you know that they have to use that card description really wisely among the other things that you would have to communicate. So that becomes a bit of a design challenge as well. So I have to use those words very choicely, judiciously. I can't have too many words. The effects themselves, I think, can't be too complicated. They need to be good enough to like have the synergy between the two different kinds of deck building. But if they start getting really, really complicated, then I think it makes it difficult for the player to follow what's actually going on in the game and to properly strategize when placing things down. So those are the design constraints. So this live stream is actually really more of a game design live stream than a programming live stream, at least for now, because that's the phase that this project's in. But you can see that that's the kind of problem that I have to solve. It's like, first of all, I have to show you, the player, that there is such a thing as like larger areas. I Another thing too, I think that's important from a design perspective is making it clear when the player is getting the benefit, like when the effect is triggered, right? So I need to make it apparent. I need to show when the effect of the special effect for the turret is activated, right? So some way of showing that this turret has that effect activated, and then some way of showing that no, it's not activated. So at least that way people know if they're succeeding or failing at the thing that they're trying to do. I think that's very important. So that's kind of where I'm at in terms of designing this thing. But at the very base level, I just need to get the new card in the game. And so to get the new card in the game, I'm just going to try out this blue icon. And then I'm going to try to have a card. I'm going to try to have it have a new name. I'm just going to start stubbing in some of that stuff, because once I do that, then I think some of the problems will become more apparent, and perhaps some of the solutions as well. So that's where I am. So what do we got to do that? This actually is a code thing now. So here we go. So what I have is I'm just calling this an area turret. Nothing special. Maybe this is like a good point to go on a bit of an aside about how a lot of other programmers would do this. Because I think a lot of other programmers would try to make some like really generic system that covers all of the bases. Like, oh, we're just gonna, we're gonna make all these properties and all these multipliers and all these systems, and we're gonna like make all of the cards work first, or we're gonna like set it up so that all of the cards could work generically, or like, actually, come to think of it, I have a very large, or I'm starting to get a large, just a file of all of the different types of cards that I want to have in the game. Okay. And it's starting to grow. And why is it starting to grow? Well, because it's becoming a bit of a combinatoric explosion, right? So you can think of these different buffs that you could get, and then there's this like combinatoric thing of like, okay, well, you also get the buff from these different properties of how you build the patio deck, right? And so they start to kind of combine and explode in a lot of ways, which means that there's a lot of different cards, right? So metal post holes which conduct electricity. Maybe a post hole that lets you, like a single post hole card that lets you play multiple of them, right? But then it costs something to do it. And similarly with joists. Like one thing I'm noticing as I'm playing is that I start to run out of joist cards. It would be nice if there was a way that I could have more joists. Different kinds of deck paneling, all the different kinds of turrets. Turrets are core to this game. So, there's a ton of those. I think a lot of novice programmers or people that are kind of indoctrinated into like this generic programming philosophy would just say, oh, we need to support, like, this is what's in the game. We need to support, like, let's start writing all the systems that support all of this stuff right now. Problem is, you don't yet know if you're going to have all of those things in the game because you haven't actually played the game with those things in it yet. And so you think that that's what you want. These are just ideas. I think I want these things, right? But the only way that I really know if I want them in the game is if I try out at least some of them more specifically. So I try this one, I try that one, I try this one, I try that one. And then I start to see how they interact with each other, and I start to get a feel for what it's like to play the game. You don't do that by putting in all of the systems at once. Really, because then you've sort of like ensnared yourself in this trap of I have to support all of these things that I'm trying to get working, that I've defined as my game. This is how I see a lot of people getting stuck, is right now it would be very easy to be like, oh, well, this is what's in the game. Let's make all of this stuff. But as soon as you add that in, you're going to have to support it. And you're going to have to think about how it interacts with all the other stuff. So in my humble experience, it's best to go one by one, just one thing at a time, and then play with it and test it and see how it works with the other stuff. And then if it happens to share some code or some properties with some other things, then you can, as Casey Muratori says, compress that bit of knowledge into a function, into some shared properties, and then move on to the next one. But just implement them one by one and play them and see how they work from a gameplay perspective before you move on to the next one. It's a great way to avoid just getting into this nasty trap. So that's why I'm only doing one of these things at a time and not like all of the stuff that I thought of, right? So we're loading that new icon. That's already done. At this point, I think I've just got to get to the part where I think there's like setup and then startup. Okay. So all I want to do is just get the new card on the screen, get it in the hand, and then start to see how it compares against the other card, the other turret, the ordinary turret card, right? So, and these are starting to get to be a lot of stuff, but that's fine. I have this struct that's called card render data. That's just like tells me what to draw on. What to draw on the screen. I'm calling this the area turret card, so that's what this is. I'm going to just use this function, area turret card. What did I call that again? I think I called it area turret icon. Okay. Now, this again, gets to be a bit of a challenge, right? From a design perspective. What do I call this thing, right? I have limited space on the card. What name is going to, without going like on two lines or whatever, right? There needs to be like a iconic name or something like that. I could call it an A turret. Problem is if I start to use like area, which is kind of what it is, then I start to, get past that space for a title, which sort of, so if I call it an A turret and it looks different from the other turret, and then maybe there's a description at the bottom that says, gain more damage when placed on a larger deck panel surface or something like that. That might be enough for players to not get confused. One consequence, or one thing I'm already realizing, is this game is going to be much more text heavy than pretty much anything I've made ever. And so I'm immediately thinking, gosh, like this better be a hit because I'm going to have to internationalize the crap out of it with all this text that's in there. It's fine. It's just something to consider. And like, I'm not going to be doing Arabic out of the gate or any of that crap. That would be later. That's only if it's like a huge mega success. We're going to do like all the like right to left text and all this other crap. But it's going to have a lot. This game is just, it's going to have a lot of text. And I unfortunately, there's no way around it because you have to tell people how the different effects work. And like visual and iconography can only take you so far. So that's the challenge that I'm facing here. So I'm just going to call it an A turret. And now I have that. So I think I can go into the, there's a number of different parts. I just want to get the card though. So I have a thing called card. Let's see. Does this tell me? Okay. Different card types. So this is just an enumeration with all the different types of cards that are in the game. I'm just going to call it, so here this is an internal name, so I can just use something much better, something that's not facing it. It's not user facing. So I'll call it a panel area turret. It's basically, in a more generic sense, it's a turret where its firepower depends on, or its buff depends on the size of the panel that it's sitting on, right? So it's a panel area turret. Now we need to set up one of those things so that it's in your starter deck. So there's a part of the game that sets that up. I think it's in my startup function. Yeah, set up starting deck. So that function, is it card.cpp? Yep. Okay. And I have a function that's like get starter card. Huh. Oh, okay. Gotcha. So I should be able to just use this. Area turret card. And now all I'm going to do is make it so that one of the first cards that you get. Wait, what did I call this thing? I like these long names, but then I like forget. There we go. No, this is not where I want to be. Neither is this where I want to be. Here is where I want to be. Okay. So that's an area turret card. I'm just going to replace this traditional turret card because I've kind of already tested that. I know how that plays. So I'm just going to not put that in the starter deck, and I'll just instead use the area turret card. Well, come to think of it, just from a visual, one good thing too is whenever you're introducing something new from a design perspective, it's always good to put it up against other similar things so that you can get a feel for visually, is this differentiating enough? Does it look different enough to give me a sense of is this good? Unfortunately, I don't really want to replace. You know what? Maybe what I'll do is I'll just put I'm gonna have more cards. Actually, yeah. Put the traditional turret into the starting deck and watch it get shuffled in. Because I actually have not yet played the game with an even larger number of different cards in the deck. So I don't have a feel for, I don't even know if that really works yet, because the game has all these, it's got all these different cards, but it does not yet have a way for the player to go and get new cards to put in the deck. So I don't even know if any of that works. So I don't want to play with that yet, because I just want to add this card and this effect, right? So we're going to do the area turret card, and then there's that. So, and then what I also know is there's a few different places. One thing is I need a new entity type for this, because I've got entity type turret, right? I would just call this area turret. Now, again, this is another area where some people are going to be like, oh, like, I don't know that I'd use like the entity type because like that needs to be generic and like it's a class of turrets and you know let's that the type is like the generic thing and so maybe we'd want to add a flag. I'm just like, no, like it's okay if there's just a lot of different kinds of stuff. If it ever becomes a problem later on, then perhaps, or maybe it's some property. But the thing is, like right now, we're just trying to get this in the game. Don't put all of these like roadblocks in front of you. Don't think too much about what this is going to be quite yet, or about how this is going to be structured yet, because you don't. I don't even know if I want to keep this. So, I think I want to keep it, but I'm just generally not sure yet. So all that stuff will shake out later. But for now, just calling it an area turret is totally fine. Adding a new entity type, totally fine. We can just have a few different checks in place if they happen to share some stuff where it's like, if it's a turret or an area turret, then do this. That's easy. So that's kind of what I want to do. That's a new entity type. And now we've got a similar kind of thing where there's got to be logic. I think it's in card. Let's see. No. It's not there. But might be in the main function. Card type. Yep. Okay, so I've got a deck building mode, turrets. Yeah. And maybe what I want to do is like, if I'm in the turret deck building mode, then I don't want to like make a new deck building mode for this. So maybe instead what I have is like an entity type that I would set on it on the game state. Because basically what's going on is like the turret building mode is kind of a special building mode that you go into where the game becomes aware of the different places where you can put turrets. This is all very, it makes you, the player, aware of where you can put the turrets. So it shows you what are the valid placement locations. And then you get to pick those locations. But you could be doing this with a lot of different kinds of turrets. So if we have different kinds of turrets, then we could have the entity type of thing that you are placing. So that would work. I think I'll try that out. This is in deck building mode. Okay, so we don't want a new deck building mode. That seems a bit, turrets are kind of, I guess maybe I'm walking back a little bit about what I said about that. Okay. Oh, there it is. Okay. Game mode. Oh yeah, it's an entity type. So all I'm doing is I'm just saying like, hey, when we're in now I won't always use this entity type because some modes some building modes, like when I'm in the deck building kind of editor that we have. Really, it is almost like a level editor if you think about it. Um, when you're in that deck building phase, you're kind of in this like city builder. I don't know what I've come up with. It's like a mash of all these jobs. It's like it's a city builder. It's like all these things. Um, it's a level editor, but it's saying like when you're some modes of deck building will have different kinds of entity types that are in them, um, like post holes, right? If the game starts to have different kinds of post holes, then all of a sudden this building entity type becomes important, um, because then I can just like set that to different ones, and then that's like kind of what's being placed down. Um, but right now, you don't need that because if you're in the post hole editing mode, if you're in post hole building mode, you're only putting down post holes. But since there's starting to be all these different kinds of turrets, it's actually relevant in this case. So I'm gonna do that. I'll just call it building entity type. Um, so if it's the current, okay, so or card type is area turret. Then we're gonna do turrets, right? Um, then we'll use the building type will be building type equals. Hello, Anna James Sarts. How you doing? Oh no, wait. Am I getting spam fished? WBY. Yeah, I'm doing good, but I'm kind of busy building stuff. So, on topic questions. Okay. Now, I mean, if you are a legitimate person, I'm sorry if it's just like a lot of this is spam. I still haven't turned on my spam filter, so that's like a thing. Um, yeah, so the building type entity needs to be just a turret, a regular turret. And then if it's this other one, card type, area turret. Nah, not you're not not spamming me, real people. Okay, so now I've got my building entity type is set, so that when I pick the next one, not a spammer. Cool. My apologies. I am new to streaming. So we've got turrets and area turrets, and we're setting that as the building type. So now when I'm in kind of this building mode, I can just say, okay, well, this is what we're going to use. We'll use a turret or an area turret, and then I've got different icons to kind of draw those things. Actually, I'm missing the art for one of these area turrets. That's annoying. I'll deal with it later. I just want to. I just want to show that there is. Yeah, I'll deal with it later. I just want to get the card on the screen. That's my present objective. So if I get the card on the screen, then that starts to inform things. If I can maybe like get it to where I'm able to start placing down this different turret, that helps. But it's kind of like one thing, one thing at a time. So this is eventually going to be like a giant big switch case, which is fine because that's just how it is. I mean, really, what this is doing is it's just like tying the next card, like the selection of the next card kind of state. So there's that bit of it. There's another one of these switch cases. I can't remember exactly where it is though. It's a little bit, because I don't always edit this. Let's see. Doesn't really tell me. I think there's something like, maybe it's at the very end. Oh yeah, it's in like drawing a card. Renderer. Card renderer. There's a lot of stuff in this game. Drawing a card, so I gotta draw the backing of the card. There's a part where draw the image container. No. Isn't there a part where I have to like get the card type? Okay, that's the next mode, but there's another part where I have to get the, oh, I think it's in the UI renderer. There's like a big switch case. I can just, a lot of times it's useful to just start looking for things in your code, because if you can't figure out where it is, just start card type star. Now this will just search everything. So once it's done, then it'll actually just show me all of the places where I found card type. Card type. Yeah. Okay, that's two of them. Where am I from? From a lot of different places. Okay, so that's 14. Okay, here's what I wanted. Yeah. So this is the part that just associates the card's type with the type of card that's like being drawn. So it's just some like a little bit of data that gets set up, like what kind of text do you want to be in the card, what sort of icon do you want, that kind of stuff. Later it's going to have a bunch of other descriptive text, like at the bottom of the card it's going to be just a little description of like the gameplay effects, like what it does. So I can also do, you know what, type equals card dot type. Very cool, you're from Florida. I don't like to I'm from Colorado and North Dakota. I've lived in a lot of different places. Florida seems cool though. So card type area turret. So an area turret, and then I'm just gonna, and a lot of this is it's not super orderly, because at some point I'm just gonna have like a big array of these things. Having like a named variable for every one of these, it sucks. But now I've kind of associated those things, so I should be able to like see my area turret card in the game when I when I build and compile it. Build and run it. Card type area turret. Okay, so that apparently doesn't exist. I thought it existed. Yay, compilers. Card.h. Oh yeah, panel area turret. Okay, so where are my problems? 1464. Okay. Here I wanted like a more descriptive, longer name, but man, this thing, I'm shooting myself in my own foot. Okay. Panel area turret. Okay. That seems to be the problem. Build it, and then try and run it. Okay. A turret. I mean, it looks like something different. It's okay. But I don't have anything that's okay. So we succeeded in the task of drawing the card, but there's a few other design considerations. One thing as well, it's becoming apparent to me. I think the cards will need to be a bit bigger. So the cards might have to go through a redesign. Just so that, because there needs to be some descriptive text down here that says what it's doing. And I don't really see a ton of space for that. Because this is a more complicated kind of a card in the game. It's got to say more about what it does than the other stuff. So, but again, that's not so much. It's not as much of a gameplay thing. All it is it's not going to affect it. Like, I know what it is if I play my own game. So if I'm just playing my game to figure out what the gameplay is like, then that's totally fine because I know what this is. I can see that it's different. It looks different. So it's good enough for me, but it wouldn't be good enough for somebody else that's playing my game, right? So somebody else that's coming in and they're going to look at this and be like, what is an A turret? There's no description of what it does, how it works. So they'll be confused. But so this is maybe to give you a little bit more of advice on prototyping. Whenever you're prototyping a game, you're going to see a lot of these things where it would be confusing to a new player, right? And then there's this part of you in the back of your head that's like, I'm a UX designer. I know like what confuses people, and we need to solve this problem because it's confusing to people. Or like, we need to have this text that like tells people what this does, or it's not going to be playable. That's correct, but I would say that comes later because the first thing that you're doing is just trying to figure out if this is fun to play. And you don't need all those UX problems to be solved to play it and to figure out if it feels fun to play, or if it feels strategic, or if it's getting at the core things that you want it to. You could just put a footnote down and say, this needs this. Like, we're going to have to get to this at some point. Totally acceptable. You don't have to have something right away that other people can play. You usually want to start out with something that you can play, that you understand it enough to be able to make decisions about it. So it's kind of like, how do I make this turret look different enough from the other stuff so that I'm not tricking myself, or so that when I'm playing it, I'm looking at it and I'm like, oh, okay, I can see this one's blue, and I know what blue means. Even if you sit someone down, right, and they're playing your game, you could actually still get some pretty good feedback from them if you just explain to them like, well, that card does this, you know, and they'll be like, oh, okay. Um, so it's just to say like we really gotta avoid this tendency to want to solve all the problems right away, because some problems you don't really you probably shouldn't solve right away. Even myself, as I do this, I'm kind of fighting myself a lot, because you'll see that I'll say, oh, we need to do this. And then like 30 minutes later, I'll be like, no, actually, we don't need to do that. And it's because I'm like, oh, that's that impulse to solve all the problems. But actually, no, we don't need to solve that problem right now. So it's this like ongoing process of figuring out what problems you actually need to solve. I think with this, we don't have to, I don't have to, I know that a card redesign is in the cards in the future, but it's not necessary right now, to get a lot of these more basic systems in place. I can still play the game without redesigning these cards so that they have a better description. So I'm just gonna like not do that and then come back to it. So I think that mostly wraps up the stream for the day. I described what I'm doing, kind of got at it a little bit, did a little bit of code to just kind of show you what I'm doing. I added a new card to the game. This stream is really more about maybe it's becoming clear that this is like really more of a design stream. Maybe it's like a prototyping and game design stream. I'm trying to figure out what the identity for this thing is, or like what's the thing that I'm doing that other people aren't doing. And I think what I'm doing is I'm actually guiding you through the design process for games, not necessarily the just the programming side, because the programming side I think it's much easier once you already know what you're doing. So I'm trying to show you how I figure out what to do when I don't know what to do. And I generally classify that as design. So with that said, I will end the stream. If there's any questions, I'll just kind of hang out for a little bit and answer them. If you have any reasonably on-topic questions about game design and that kind of thing, roguelike deck builder game design. I am told that the chat is slow. Okay, well, with that said, I wish you a very enjoyable afternoon. See you next time. I stream Monday through Friday at 11 o'clock EST. I know it's a bit of a weird time, but it's the time that works for me, so catch you later.